Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Inshallah, we're going to get started right away. Thank you guys for joining us and for actually being very punctual today. Alhamdulillah, it's nice to see so many people already on. And alhamdulillah, we are starting after Maghrib. My class is the only one that will be that way. I do better later in the evening than earlier. So thank you guys for staying committed to the class even with the time change. Barakallahu fikum. We'll get started, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير وابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his family and followers and companions. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, to call to guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings of Allah be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family and his sincere followers and companions. Ameen. So inshallah, today we will be continuing with Surah Al-Nazi'at, but as we're going to continue with our tradition, which is to actually look at the spiritual lessons from the verses of last week before we get started on the verses of this week. So just one moment. Just want to pull up the verses from last week. Just a moment. I'm getting there. All right. I'm going to only pull up the English. Okay, we can all see it, inshallah. Now, we covered the tafsir of verses 15 through 26, the linguistic and the meaning. But at the very end, Ibn Ajiba likes to do a spiritual commentary or a metaphysical or metaphorical commentary. And in this one, I'll start with what he says. So his is, looking at the verses in a way that applies to the believer and to the Muslim who is striving to draw themselves closer to God. Ibn Ajiba says that Imam al-Qushayri likens Musa alayhi salam to the heart. Musa alayhi salam represents the heart. So I'll just read these verses quickly. Has there reached you the story of Moses when his Lord called out to him in the holy valley of Tuwa, "Go to Pharaoh, truly he has rebelled, and say, would you purify yourself, or would you not purify yourself? And let me guide you to your Lord so you would fear him." Then he showed him the greatest sign, but he denied and disobeyed, then turned his back, moving swiftly. Then he gathered and proclaimed and said, "I am your Lord Most High." He gathered his soldiers, or he gathered his people, he gathered his magicians. We talked about that. So God seized him with a punishment exemplary in the hereafter and in this world. Truly, in that is a lesson for whosoever fears or whosoever has reverence for God. So now Imam al-Qushayri, he says that Musa alayhi salam, he represents the heart, and Pharaoh represents the lower self. And so it is said, have you not heard the speech of your heart when its Lord called it to the divine presence after cleansing it from created things from the mirror of its sight? Okay. Or after it was cleansing could also be collapsing, the translation of the word. Um, so he said, and this is his Lord said, go to the Pharaoh of your lower self, for truly it has transgressed. It's telling the heart, go to your lower self, for your lower self has truly transgressed. Its transgression is in wanting to be above others and to be apparent and noticed, to be famous. Say to it, would you not like to be cleansed and purified from ugliness and filth, so you may enter the divine presence and be guided to knowing your Lord and reverencing him? For truly, the ones who know him revere him. Here again, the word is yakhsha. I'm translating the word yakhsha. We just had a discussion about what that word is. What it indicates, a rough translation is revere. So the ego is shown the biggest sign, and that is to break the bad habits and to defy their lower desires. But then the lower self denies it and rebels when it saw the heart's resolution to struggle against it. So the lower self called its soldiers, which were from love of the material world and in attachments, love of lording over others, and being famous among people, love of fortune and desires. And the lower self told them, I am your Lord Most High, don't worship other than me. So Allah gave it a befitting punishment for its later and earlier sins and transgressions. Allah sent the soldiers of the heart against them, against all of these, against the Pharaoh of the lower self and the soldiers of Pharaoh, right? So Allah sent the soldiers of the heart against them and drowned them all in the ocean of witnessing and loving God. In this is a sign for whoever has reverence of God and treads the spiritual path. They will arrive, inshallah, at the ocean of God's oneness. In Arabic, it's Bahrul Ahadiyya. And he says at the end, Ibn Ajiba, he says beautifully, he says, and God knows the beautiful secrets of his book. Or God best knows the secrets of his book. So that is his spiritual commentary. You look at the story of Pharaoh and Moses, and that's not just a story to look at in the past, but to look at it within ourselves. The struggle between the heart, which loves God and wants to turn to God, and the lower self, which seeks to rebel against the inclination of the spiritual heart and pull it into an abyss of transgression. And yet, if that heart does genuinely have reverence for God, then and they tread the spiritual path, they stay on it, they don't give up, then eventually all of their own lower, attachments, God will send the soldiers of the heart against them, and they will be drowned by the soldiers of the heart and in an ocean of witnessing the divine. So this is something that I found was really beautiful and a very good way to start the next set of verses, inshallah. Now let me go to the next set of verses for this week. All right. I am trying to, let me stop the share and let me do a new share. Just a second, because it doesn't show us sharing for me. Were you guys able to see it the first time? Okay, so you can see, does it say Journey Through the Qur'an Tafsir of An-Nazi'at Part 3? Is that what everyone can see? Okay, alhamdulillah, wonderful. All right, we have a good amount of verses to cover today. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها رفع سمكها فسواها وأغطش ليلها وأخرج ضحاها والأرض بعد ذلك ضحاها أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها والجبال أرساها متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سعى وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى. So we're only going to verse 41 today, inshallah. Are you more difficult to create or the sky that he has built? He raised high its canopy and fashioned it, darkened its night and brought forth its day. And after that he spread out the earth. From it he brought forth its water and its pastures, and the mountains he set firm, as sustenance for you and for your flocks. So when the great calamity befalls, a day when man shall remember that for which he endeavored, and hellfire is made visible to one who sees. As for one who rebels and prefers the life of this world, truly hellfire is the refuge. As for one who fears standing before his Lord and forbids the soul from capri, truly the garden is the refuge. Now the first verse, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاء بَنَاهَا. Are you more difficult to create or the sky that he has built? Here, the question is something that points to the listener, and it specifically, it's also pointing to the Quraysh, the people of Quraysh who are receiving the wahi at this time. This is a Meccan surah, that an evidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no problem or difficulty in resurrecting all of mankind after it dies, after mankind dies, is in the creation of the sky that they can see around them. There's a similar verse also that's mentioned in Surah Ghafir, verse 57. Surely the creation of the heavens and the earth is bigger than the creation of mankind, but most of mankind know not. And also in Surah Yasin, is not he who created the heavens and the earth able to create the like thereof? Like he who made all of this around us, is he not able to create a heaven and a hell and an afterlife and a day of judgment? And that's this is something that is a really important lesson. There's many, I mean, there's one, I guess, really significant lesson in this, and it has manifestations in different parts of our lives. The significant lesson is there are people who were from the Quraysh who believed, they believed in idols and smaller gods, but they also did believe, a category from them did believe of a God who is the creator of everything. Okay, so they believe these smaller idols have power, right? They are mushrikeen, but they also did believe in a highest power, a God who was the creator of all that exists. Yet they could not believe that after they died, he would resurrect them and judge them and hold them accountable. And then there would be an afterlife, of heaven and hell. For some reason, their minds couldn't come to that. And here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, again, are you more difficult to create, or the sky that he has built, right? Something that's really interesting about this is there, the disbelief of in the idea that how am I, how will I be, come back to life after I have died? That's impossible to me. That's the mentality that is being addressed here. It's impossible to me that after I was born, I lived an entire life, and then I'm buried, and these are things I can see with my five senses, right? That somehow after that, I'm supposed to believe that I will be resurrected, and there's going to be a whole nother afterlife, which I don't see. And a major problem with that is the belief of this is impossible, right? If your existence is possible, then how, in this moment, in this world, then how can it not be possible afterwards in a different way? And there's actually something that's interesting. There's a rule, or there's like a spiritual rule in Arabic. It's al-qurbu hijab, al-qurbu hijab, which means sometimes being near something, so close to something, causes a person to be veiled from it. Okay, so here there's a self-centeredness, right? The human being, the ego, is so self-centered. I'm so important. This life is so important. What I see and how I perceive things is so important that it actually can't see itself as actually being a tiny, insignificant part of the creation all around it, even in terms of the world today. It doesn't recognize like the sky is bigger than you are, the universe is bigger than you are, the mountains and the earth and the seas and the oceans and all of life that surrounds you is so much bigger than you are. So there's a self-centeredness of the person is so close to their own like self, really, and what concerns the self, that it can't recognize the magnificence of everything else that is not immediately, concerning the I want to say the desires of the self. All right. And so it can't be in awe and wonder of the universe that it sees. And so what these verses do is it helps to address that psychology that is so self-centered, that it doesn't believe that it can be resurrected. Like you're so important, you think you know everything, and you don't even notice that the world around you is greater than you, and the one who made the world around you that is so vast and miraculous is capable of making an afterlife that's even more so. So so there's something important there. I want to again emphasize that lesson, al-qurbu hijab. Sometimes being too close to something creates a veil from recognizing it, how significant it is. The person who is so close to their own self in an egotistical way doesn't realize, that it was created by God and that the God can bring them back. It's close to, like, it's attached to the material world, but yet it can't see that this world is a sign of God, a sign of his power, and in it are even the signs that we will be resurrected. So we can apply that even to the Prophet Muhammad SAW himself, that from one person who disbelieved in him was someone who was technically a relative, someone who was a relative we deem to be someone who is closer to you than someone who is far. But the Prophet Muhammad SA's uncle Abu Lahab rejected him, and even though he was close to him, he could not allow himself to see the magnificence of the Prophet Muhammad that would allow him to believe in him. And that really comes from arrogance, and it does come from, again, being very self-centered. Some of the great Islamic scholars of the past and sages of the past were said that their relatives actually didn't realize what great and magnificent scholars they were in their time, because it was just, you know, the cousin or the relative or the son even, or the husband, or the wife. And because of proximity, they were veiled from who that person was in terms of their special qualities. They could only see their human attribute. They couldn't see their spiritual attribute. So that's just one thing to reflect on from that verse is al-qurbu hijab. Sometimes we're close to things, people, places, scenarios, and it's our own self-centeredness that doesn't allow us to see the magnificence in them. And the more humility we have, the more appreciation we have for what we're close to. And then we can truly be granted that insight and knowing the spiritual significance of that which is close to us and around us. رَفَعَ سَمْكَهَا فَسَوَّاهَا. He raised high its canopy and fashioned it. Samk is translated as canopy. It's like the highest, it indicates the highest level of the sky. Ibn Ajiba describes it as being the roof. You know, if the sky has a roof, this is samkaha, you know, the Allah raised the roof of the sky and then fashioned it, fasawaha. And sawa here has indicates that it doesn't have any rifts. It's beautiful. It contains the stars and the planets. It's perfected, and you know, there's no breaks in it. It is strong and solid, and is a magnificent creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Ajiba, he says about the sky, he says, no one can fathom its lowest level or its highest level or the levels in between. No one can even, the mind can't grasp what that is. And in it is a sign of God's power. وَأَغْطَشَ لَيْلَهَا وَأَخْرَجَ ضُحَاهَا. And he darkened its night and brought forth its day. Now, day translates as duhaha. It can also mean its light. Like what he darkened its night and brought forth its light. You know, after the darkness, which indicates the morning brightness. And he, okay, there's one more verse. I think it's in the next slide. وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ ضَحَاهَا. And after that, he spread out the earth. So what's interesting here about the way this is said, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ ضَحَاهَا. بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ comes, you know, after that. After that, he spread out the earth. So there are different opinions. Imam al-Qurtubi, he says that the creation of the earth came after, the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi came after the creation of the skies, and also the not just the skies, but the day and the night that was appointed to the skies through the sun and the moon. And then Ibn Ajiba mentions a couple opinions, which says that this kind of like the seed of the earth was created first. Then the skies and the heavens and the day and the night were created. And then that seed was turned into the sphere, which became the world, right? So it was spread out. There's two different interpretations. One is that the earth, the entirety of the earth was created after the entirety of the skies, and you know, and that which was held or carried within the skies. The second opinion is that like the beginning of the earth was created first, and in one opinion it was the beginning of the earth started with a point that was at Beit al-Maqdis, right? The sacred house that we, you know, we consider to be in Palestine. So that, and then the heavens, and then that seed was then flattened or spread out and into the spherical world which we have. So that's regardless of which interpretation, I just think it's amazing. to reflect on, that there was a time when there wasn't the world and there weren't the skies. And then there was a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create this world that we live in. And at some point he flattened out the earth. And there's also a miracle in this too. The word dahaha indicates that it's been flattened out or spread out. And Ibn Ajiba, he says that it's spread out so that mankind can live on it. So it can be inhabitable by human beings, by the creation of human beings and the creation that is meant to live among the human beings. And yet the world is not, the earth is not flat, right? Like it's not a prism, it's not a cube. The earth is a globe. If any of us were to, it's spherical. So if, think about standing on a basketball, we would fall off, right? But that human beings, this vast earth that we would live on would take the shape of a sphere and yet be flattened under our feet in such a way that we can walk across it and live and travel. In that is a miracle as well. That the earth is, again, spread out, flattened out for us, and yet it is spherical and then enters into the orbit that was created for it, which is so that it can experience the night and day, the darkness and the light. Together, these verses, again, are speaking to the psychology of one who rejects the idea of a day of judgment and thinks there's, that's some kind of a strange idea or an impossibility. And it's drawing to that person's mind, look at the miracle of what exists around you right now. Look at the greatness of what exists around you right now. Look at the sky. There are no rifts. There are no crevices. There, it doesn't break. It doesn't fall. Look at the earth that is flattened out in front of you. And it continues. أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها. From it, he brought forth its water and its pastures. Its waters here are the springs and the rivers that are drinking water, right? The sweet water is what Ibn Ajiba mentions. And the pastures, which are then also able to benefit from that water. And there's a couple interpretations. One is that mara'aha refers to all plant life in terms of its pastures. And then the second opinion is that it's an allusion to everything that is eaten by human beings and animals. So pastures can be plants, it can also be other animals, it can be whatever, fruits, vegetables, whatever human beings and animals eat. It's a reference to that because they are raised by, or they are grown through the existence of the water that has been brought out for it. وَالْجِبَالَ أَرْسَاهَا, and the mountains he set firm. And it's interesting, we're going to cover this when we do Surah An-Naba, but here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the mountains themselves firm, and he made through the firm mountains, he made the earth firm. And the reason is because the mountains are like pegs, right? That's something that is in Surah An-Naba, which is something that would be impossible, again, for the early Arabs to have understood or to have known or to have access to in terms of outward knowledge or seen knowledge. Because what we see from a mountain is that which is above the earth. But in reality, what we see above the earth of a mountain is actually less than what exists underneath the surface of the earth. It actually is more of like a peg, like a tent peg, and it holds down the tectonic plates of the earth. So the mountains themselves are firm, and the mountains that are firm also help make the earth firm. Ibn Ajiba mentions this. He says, through them, the earth itself is made firm. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ, as sustenance for you and for your flocks. So here we have, again, an indication that all of what we enjoy is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is for us, like the imperative preposition here is the lam. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. It's a sustenance for you and for your flocks. You see the skies, you see the earth and it's flattened, you see the mountains that are like pegs holding it down, making the earth firm, and the water that's brought forth from the earth, and it feeds the pastures, and it, there's in that there is sustenance for human beings and sustenance for the flocks that human beings own. There's enough sustenance for all of living creation. And here again, that we need to be grateful. We did not create the mountains. We did not create the sky. We did not create the pastures. We did not bring forth the waters. All of these things human beings were born into enjoying. And so therefore, there is one who did create all of this. And there is one who did sustain and does sustain all of us through what he has created. And again, the lam here is, there's an indication that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sustains all things and has made all things subservient to human beings. So part of like the purpose of an animal, the existence of certain animals, is that they are the food for human beings. Does that mean we oppress them? No. There is a degree of balance and respect in the circle of life and all of that, but they are there for us. And they were created for us. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. Human beings are thus the vicegerents, or the word that's used in the Qur'an is the khulafa, or the stewards of the earth. Allah created all that is in the earth, and He has made He has created them as sustenance for us and for our flocks. We are the stewards. We are the caretakers of the earth around us, and yet we have to remain thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sustenance. And part of it is that when you are the caretaker, you don't look at yourself as the owner, right? And this is where much transgression comes from, is the person doesn't see themselves as a steward of the blessings that has bestowed upon them by the true owner, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they begin to see themselves as the owner. And this allows them to oppress. When you are a steward of what is in your hands, then you want to share the resources with all of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see yourself as being responsible and answering to someone else, right? If someone, for example, has a company and they allow a director to direct that company, all of the money of the company does not belong to the director, right? They are not the director is not the CEO. They are not the owner. They are simply directing things on behalf of someone else that they answer to. And this is a bad analogy, but just because of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above every example, but just to draw into our minds the idea of, what it means to be a khalifa on this earth as a human being, and to be a steward, one who is responsible and answers to someone else, one who does not own even the things that they technically are the owners of in terms of fiqh, right? Like a person has this much money and they have to give this much in zakat and all of that. Yes, that's your money, but in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns you and your money. So just keeping that balance in mind. All of what we enjoy, all of it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the true owner. Now, what's really amazing is the verses that we started with up until this point are describing the greatness and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it is manifested in what we as human beings get to enjoy in our worldly lives, right? We do enjoy these things. We do enjoy the sky. We do enjoy looking at the stars. We do enjoy traveling to the mountains and going to Big Bear, and just there is visual enjoyment when we experience the world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us. There's enjoyment in the food that we eat. There's enjoyment in the water that we drink, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing to us in these verses, look at what He has created that we do enjoy and that we should be grateful for, and that should remind us of Him. These are the manifestations of His greatness now that we see. And then the next verse goes to a different indication of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الطَّامَّةُ الْكُبْرَى. So when the great calamity befalls, linguistically, when someone is reciting the Qur'an nicely with tilawa, with like, the right, in the most beautiful way, the other verses are short. And then all of a sudden, this verse kind of breaks that rhythm. And the med in Tama is 4 or 6. There's a shadda on the meme, so you can, there's an elongation of that word. The word the ta in Tama is also mushaddada. So like it's a heavy word. It's a long word. It breaks the cycle of the sound that comes before it. And the word Tama here, the translation is great, is calamity, right? So when comes the calamity that is great, or when befalls the calamity, and it's as if it's saying when befalls the calamity that is great. Like it really emphasizes the calamity. And this is another, like it's taking that person, it's taking us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-powerful who created the world that we enjoy, the water that we drink, and he is the all-powerful that has decreed a day of which he describes himself as the great calamity when it befalls. And there's no answer, by the way, to this clause. The way that it is phrased is fa'ida, so when, right, the great calamity befalls. And there's no, like, in sentences we would say, so when I go out to the park, I will ride my bike. There's an answer to that. There's a jawab, right? There's no jawab. And so what the Mufassirin said is that the omission of a response here to the conditional word ida, which is when, is really an affirmation that what is supposed to occur will absolutely occur. So that's why it's phrased that way. So when the great calamity befalls, and the fact that there's no response means it emphasizes that what is meant to occur will absolutely certainly occur. And so what comes afterwards is simply a description of the day, but it doesn't actually give a response to this clause. It just describes the day, which is the day of the great calamity. And there's different opinions as to why what is referred to as the great calamity. There's about 4 different opinions. One of the opinions is that it refers to the day of judgment. And again, the word tama literally, linguistically, comes from the meaning to be abundant or to rise over, as would a flood. And it implies that tama is the greatest of all tremendous events, because its overabundance encompasses all things, right? So that's in terms of the linguistic meaning. So one opinion is that this is a reference to the Day of Judgment. At-Tamatul Kubra is Yawm al-Qiyamah. The second is that it's a reference to specifically the second cry of the trumpet, or the second trumpet that is blown, and then all human beings and jinn are gathered. So that's a specific event on the Day of Judgment. The third opinion is that it refers to the resurrection itself, when the souls come out of the graves, because it surpasses and predominates over all things. This opinion is in the Tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. And then finally, there's also an interpretation by some as At-Tamatul Kubra is the very moment when specifically the people who are meant to go to hellfire are then led to hellfire, and the people of paradise are led to paradise. So it's a great calamity for those who don't get to go to paradise. Those are the 4 different opinions. So now, when the great calamity befalls, Jazakallah khair Batul for that beautiful contribution. I'm going to read it to everyone. She says, the blessings mentioned before are all in our daily lives, things we don't even consider as blessings. This verse is now saying, what if even the basic things in your life go away? It's strong imagery. Yep, absolutely. Because Tamatul Kubra, right, when the great calamity befalls, then the world is changed. It's a different existence on the day of judgment. And now the day of judgment is being described. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ مَا سَعَى, a day when man shall remember that for which he endeavored. And, you know, this is also significant. All people will remember on the day of judgment the good and the evil that they did, even if they had forgotten some of their deeds while in this world, because all of their deeds will be recorded, and their limbs will actually testify. Aside from the fact there will be a record that will be read, their limbs will testify to the truth of what they had done. In Surah Al-Mujadala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the translation of which is, on the day when God resurrects them all together, then informs them of that which they did. God has kept account of it while they have forgotten. And I think in Arab, in the word that's used in this verse, verse 35, يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ مَا سَعَى, a day when man shall remember what they used to spend their time in, what they used to, sa'a is like what you used to flee towards. Think of sa'i in the pilgrimage, right? Running between Safa and Marwa is called sa'i, right? A person is rushing towards something. So a human being will remember on that day, al-insan, the human being will remember what they used to rush towards and do. So that's one of the descriptions of the day which is described as a great calamity. Remembering is painful for people when they forgot things that are going to be very important on that day. Think about this life and think about the things that you don't like to remember. Right? We could ask a psychologist or a therapist, a counselor, what are some things people actually don't like to remember? A lot of times people don't like to remember trauma, right? So they block it out. Anything traumatic or painful or sad, they will block it out. Another thing that some people don't like to remember is when they have done wrong. They don't want to not only acknowledge it, they don't want to remember it. If someone else tries to remind them of it for whatever reason, maybe they need to apologize, maybe they don't want to remember what they did. They don't remember, like if they'll remember a conflict, and they'll remember, if they tell the story of the conflict, they'll leave out all of the things they did wrong and only tell the story from the side of what the wrong that the other person did to them, right? They will not remember like their own shortcoming in the situation. Sometimes there are special people who they actually don't remember when they do good for others, they don't remember it. But when other people do good for them, they remember it. And that's a good quality, right? A person who they don't see and they don't hold on, they don't keep account of the good that they do for other people. They because they did it for Allah, they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has full knowledge of it and it's recorded with him. And so they allow themselves to forget it. And it such that it does not make them arrogant, or the remembrance of that does not, cause a feeling of better than others. But if someone does something for them, they'll remember it regularly, and they'll remember it in a way that allows them to be grateful to them and appreciative towards them and have good conduct towards them. So that's a good quality. But it's interesting how memory works. What does memory block out? And what does memory hold on to? And what is a good thing for us to forget now that we'd be happy about if on the day of judgment it comes out and we're reminded of? And what are things we don't want to forget about now, so that we inshallah we don't have to actually face them for the first time on the day of judgment? If we remember our shortcomings and hold ourselves to account, right? As Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, hold yourselves accountable before you are accounted for. So this specifically deals with the things that we do wrong, holding ourselves accountable. And I don't mean beat yourself up, but specifically if there's a harm to someone else, being able to confront that and remember it, and then to go back and to make amends, because that's not something we want to have to deal with on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's really not something we have time now. We're alive now, alhamdulillah. If there is something where we have wronged someone else in a way that God would hold us accountable for that, then we want to be of those who make amends for that now. I'm not saying we're responsible for everybody's feelings. Sometimes people's feelings are hurt and you did nothing wrong. Okay, so I'm not saying become that person who needs to always please everyone. You can embroil yourself in some toxic relationships if you do that. But think about, what will God ask me about? And if there's something that when you ask yourself, what am I held accountable for in front of God, that you want to make sure, inshallah, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that's not something that will be questioned of you. So you handle it in this world, and you remedy it in this world, whether that's apology, whether that's returning something back to someone that you have, or whatever it is, but trying to alleviate that accountability from happening on the Day of Judgment, by holding yourself accountable now. We can't do that unless we remember. I want us to actually to reflect on Black Lives Matter for a second. One of the things that's discussed is in the struggle for Black lives and liberation in this country, is how other countries in the world had a history of slavery. Okay, other countries did around the world. America is one of many countries who practiced slavery. Other countries also practiced heinous crimes against its indigenous peoples. But a lot of these other countries came to terms and had to face their past in a very direct way. So Canada, for example, the way that the First Nations of Canada are treated today, in terms of Canada coming clean with its own past, right? They had a reckoning. They had a sense of holding themselves somewhat, I'm not saying completely, but somewhat accountable for its political history in terms of the oppression that it wreaked on the First Nations and what it owed to the First Nations. There's a different reality in Canada because it held itself accountable at some level. Even as it relates to slavery, it held itself accountable on some level. American history is different. America has always been in denial. You may learn about slavery in schools, and you may learn about the genocide, that essentially it was a genocide against the First Nations in America. But you still have things like Columbus Day and Thanksgiving and whatever, and all of these symbols that are a huge contrast. The celebration of symbols that upheld slavery, the Confederate flag, for crying out loud, things like that. So it hasn't actually held itself accountable. It does not hold itself accountable when it comes to the wars that have occurred in other countries. And in terms of terrible foreign policy in all around the world, involving itself economically in situations that it should not be in. America has never, as a government, held itself accountable, and so you find within it the level of unrest, political and social. You find within it all of the traces of the attitudes of slavery still alive and well within this country, because it never had a reckoning. It never faced its past properly. Other countries have. There have been public apology in governmental level change. And I'm not saying that other countries are perfect, but I'm saying America is one of the worst when it comes to its record of holding itself accountable. And I think part of it is this idea of protecting a sense of innocence of the American dream, right? Like there has to be a utopian, airbrushed image of the making of America and what makes America great. And, right, like make America great again. That's the slogan. And what that seeks to do is to just brush all of the oppression under the rug, like it never happened. Let's forget that slavery happened. Let's forget that police brutality is still happening. Let's forget about foreign policy. Let's forget about all of the wrongs and just celebrate things like, the number of jobs that have been created or whatever it is, right? Let's try to celebrate a myth and forget about all of the evils. That's an example on a macro level of a country that does not want to remember and does not want to hold itself accountable. And what we can see, what that does is it breeds illness on a social level. And even now we have a pandemic that is more widespread in America than it is in many other countries of the developed world. Canada is only, as an example, only has a fraction of the widespreadness of the pandemic as America does. So anyways, that's a huge tangent. Forgive me for that. But these are things to reflect on, that there are, like, human beings do not like to remember when they do things that are wrong. Countries, nations that are oppressive do not like to remember when they do things that are wrong. They don't want to be held accountable, but all of us will be held accountable. There'll be a day when every person is going to remember that for which they endeavored. وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى, and hellfire is made visible for one who sees. Here, one who sees can be, it's either a reference specifically to the disbelievers, because they're going to be the ones who are specifically made to look in that direction. And it can also be a reference to all human beings. Ibn Ajiba, he says that all who have eyes will be able to see hellfire on that day, because it will be brought forth without a veil, and they will be given the capacity to be able to see it. There's one opinion in the Tafsir of Imam al-Razi who says that it cannot refer to disbelievers because the realities of the hereafter can only be seen by those who have eyes, and on that day the eyes of the disbelievers are supposed to be covered. So there's some disagreement on that. فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى. As for one who rebels and prefers the life of this world, truly hellfire is the refuge. Here, one who rebels, it refers to Imam al-Razi, he says it refers to the corruption of the person's intellect, because all who know God, right, they have good intellect, and those who know God know their own insignificance. And so they cannot incline towards rebellion and arrogance against him. Preferring the life of this world is also a corruption of the actions that occurs because the intellect has been corrupted. And there's a narration of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that's in the Tafsir of Imam al-Razi, which is the love of this world, right? Hubbul Hayatud Dunya is the source of all evil or all error, which is, I think, really profound. Love of this world, right? Hayatud Dunya is the way that it's said in Arabic, is the source of all error. If you think of any wrong, any sin, any mistake, any shortcoming, you will find that wrapped up in, like, what's inside of it, what's wrapped up inside of it is an attachment, a worldly attachment that is hidden. Whatever shortcoming, if you've ever made tawbah from something and made istighfar about doing something, and you look at that thing and you're like, how did I do that? Inside of that error, you're going to find some kind of worldly attachment. Does that mean it has to be material or physical? It could be something that's a worldly attachment is something like love of fame or love of authority or love of position. That's technically not something that you can physically hold, but it is a worldly attachment. So it can be a worldly attachment, which is what in Arabic it's described as ma'nawi. It's something that of meaning, or it can be something physical. The two together, right? The one who rebels and the one who, and they prefer the life of this world, they describe the greatest level of corruption, the punishment for which is eternal. So hellfire becomes, the word that's used is ma'wa, and it's used that way for the purpose of emphasizing irony. There's no refuge, there's no sanctuary in hellfire, but it's to indicate, okay, the one who does this, that's their only, that is their resting place. And so that is a literary device in the Arabic language to use the word ma'wa in that way when it's referring to hellfire. And we know that hellfire, there is no rest, or there is no, like, peace in it. So, but it is their only peace, or is their only place of refuge, which means that they have no real refuge. And that emphasizes the gravity of the punishment of hellfire. Now, those who rebel and who prefer the life of this world in a lesser way. So there's a way that the Pharaoh did so, and then there's lesser ways. People still believe in God. They still are trying to be good, but they still do a lot of evil in their life. Imam al-Razi, he says, they may still be punished, but hellfire will not be their ultimate refuge. They may go there for a time and then be removed from hellfire and purified and then allowed to enter paradise. So it's not that it is forever for everyone. It is forever for some people. And even in that, there's some debate. So, but we'll leave it at that for now. In the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us repeatedly to beware of the life of this world. In Surah Ali Imran, the life of this world is not but enjoyment of delusion. Also, the hereafter is better and more enduring. There's constantly this contrast between the life of this world and al-akhirah, what is temporary and what is everlasting, what is immediate and what is delayed. And subhanAllah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the intelligent person is the one who takes his soul to account and works for that which follows death. And the inept person is the one who allows his or her soul to follow his or her capri, their hawa, and yet they hope for God. This is quoted in the tafsir of Ibn Ajiba. So, which brings us to our next verses. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. And as for one who fears standing before their Lord and forbids their soul from capri, or their desires, truly the garden is the refuge. And here the word refuge is suited for the sentence, because paradise is a sanctuary and it is bliss and it is rest. Maqama Rabbihi can mean standing before one's Lord. It can also be the station in front of their Lord. And it indicates being aware of standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment and answering for all of one's deeds. Imam al-Razi, he sees this fear of standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the exact opposite as the one who rebels against God. Because rebellion indicates ignorance, and fear, and again, the word that we here says khafa, it's actually the word fear, implies knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we said this last week, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. Only those among his servants who know God fear God. And al-ulama there is knowing God. It's not like scholars. It's people who know God. One who forbids their soul from their desires is the opposite of one who prefers the life of this world. Rebellion is seen as connected to love of this world. Fear of God is seen as leading the soul to perform the acts of obedience and good deeds. Now, I want to mention something here in terms of fear of God, because it's the word here is actually khafa. Khafa, it does actually mean the word fear. And here it doesn't say fear God, it says fear of standing before their Lord. So it's the accountability that of being in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day. And they have a fear of that moment, right? And being in his presence and the certainty of the accountability that happens in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that's interesting, and I recently heard Dr. Umar Farouk Abdullah talk about this, was or is this idea of having a level of reverence, right? Yakhsha for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and loving him at the same time. How do you fear Allah and love Allah? How do you revere and respect the majestic power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his beautiful names? And he does have both beatific and majestic names, and they do bring out in us different things, right? So we know from the Qur'an also to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we also know from the Qur'an that khashya is an important quality. And I think what Dr. Umar Farouk Abdullah mentioned was that when people, even good people, when we persist in sins, that there's a particular sin and we just keep persisting in it, and we don't actually want to change it, not anytime soon, not anytime yet. It's kind of like, I'll get to it one day, that type of thing. One of the reasons that human beings do that is because they are lacking in khashya, right? They're too at home with God, right? And so because they're too at home with God, and in that is a level of imbalance that causes them to think it's okay to just not have to deal with this for a while, right? Because when people really know God, they also know his majesty. So they're not, and knowing his majesty is important because it allows us not to be so at home with him that we think it's okay to just keep committing the same sins over and over again, and we're just going to do them, and we're going to pretend we're not doing them. And for we may not even make istighfar for them. We may not even make tawbah for them. They've just become a part of our lives, and we've accepted it as such. And so, and that's okay, because that's just, that's just where a person wants to be. That person, it doesn't mean they're evil. It just means that they lack a certain degree of khashya that's needed. There's some khashya that's missing in their heart. There's some that God truly is both beautiful, has both beatific qualities, and he's also majestic. He has powerful qualities. His punishment is severe. Hellfire does exist. And khashya is something that actually prevents us from just allowing our desires to control us and move us in any direction. So that's why, coming back to the statement, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. Like, they tell their lower selves, you can't do that. I'm not going to let you move me around. They forbid. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Truly, the garden is their refuge. And this idea of acknowledging that the desire is there, the desire wants the person to do something that is forbidden, expressly forbidden, right? And then that the person says, well, I don't care, I want to do it anyway. That's the person that's the person who's allowing their soul to control them, their hawa, their desires to control their soul. Another person sees the desire and just tells the soul no, tells the lower self and the desire, no, we're not doing that, because I have this khashya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I fear that moment on the day of judgment when I will stand in front of him and I will have to account for this moment. So the word hawa, the root of it means to blow or to fall or tumble. From its root is also the meaning of to overthrow. And this is what it does to the soul. The hawa seeks to blow the soul into different directions, to cause it to fall and tumble, and to overthrow the soul so that it does whatever the desire tells it to do. And we have an opportunity, actually, in these beautiful days, best days of the year, the days of Dhul Hijjah. These are the days where righteous acts are rewarded more than any other day, more than any other 10 days of the year. These are the best 10 days of the year. And we're going to actually be doing a short series, inshallah, through the majlis, talking about these days and how to take advantage of them. One of good deeds are multiplied. One of the narrations, I think it's from the Tabi'een, says that to fast one of the days of these 10 days is like fasting a whole month. One day is like a month. So fasting, the first 9 days, fasting the first 8 days is like 8 months. And the day of Arafah, right, is has its own reward for fasting on that day, which is immense and enormous. But fasting in general is one of the ways in which we start to train ourselves, our lower selves, and start to say no to the desires. It's a way of having, some strength over the hawa and forbidding the hawa from controlling us. No, you will not eat, you will not drink, you will stay up and pray. The worship regimen of a Muslim is something that helps to control the hawa from lording over the self. And so if we can't fast on the days, or if we're, that seems a little overwhelming, to try to at least fast on the day of Arafah, but also that because these are such blessed days in the year, you don't, you can choose an aspect of your lower self to try to fast from. People used to sometimes, in order to draw themselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would try to fast from speech, right? They would try not to talk so much, or only speak that which was absolutely necessary to speak, or they would fast from, if they were eating things that were really bad for their health, they would fast from that. So you can fast from a particular desire, even if you can't fast all of the 8 days or 9 days. You can choose something to fast from. Christians have something called Lent, where some of them will pick something that they will not eat on during that time. But for us, if the first encouragement is to try to fast, and if not that, then to pick things that that your soul wants, that you have. I shouldn't say your soul, because your true soul wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but your lower self or your desires call you to things, habits that you want to not have. You want to be better, you want to develop self-discipline, whatever those things are. These special days are times to practice, and sort of endeavor in that way. Let that be your sa'i. Your sa'i is not going to be between Mount Safa and Mount Marwa, but it will be towards leaving things which the desires call for, and rushing towards things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. And we can I wouldn't say don't choose anything overwhelming, because that's one of the traps of shaitan, is to try to get people to do, plan a lot of things that are so much and so overwhelming, then the person gives up after day one. So pick something that has a challenge to it, that you have to exert yourself to say no, but don't make it so challenging that it would cause you to give up. And that would be the assignment for this week. There is a metaphorical commentary. We will not go into it. That will be what we start with, inshallah, next week. Let me see. Does anyone have any questions before we close? If you have any reflections as well, you are welcome to share. Batul, by the way, thank you so much for your reflection, alhamdulillah. I love it when people engage. I might start asking people to share their cameras, to share their screens. I know that most people are not using their screens, but nobody will be able to see it on YouTube if you do, because I have locked it on my own screen. And it just helps me to see people's facial expressions. This is good. Would a social media fast count? Yes, a social media fast would count. Absolutely. That's a good one. That's a very good one, Brother Adil. Thank you for saying that. You can go onto your phone and you can delete social media. You can delete your Facebook take it off if that's where you check it from. Whatever other social media accounts. Netflix counts. There's other things out there now other than Netflix. I don't know all of them, but you can pick. I think we all could use a Netflix fast. Barakallahu fikum. Janice, yeah, that's from Ibn Ajib, alhamdulillah. And he was quoting Imam al-Qushayri. So inshallah, that's the class for today. I think before we close, really everyone here think of the thing that you're going to fast from. If you're not fasting these days, think of what it is. And our goal is to do nahi on our hawa, right? To say no to whatever it is. It could be ice cream, it could be chocolate cake, it could be whatever it is that the hawa is telling you to do. And some of you guys are letting me know online, alhamdulillah. You don't have to say it, but if you want to share, that's fine. There's Netflix fast. Someone wants to fast from their phone. That's a huge one, mashallah. But just think of something. It's only 8 days, and it's a practice, and it's good for us to do these things. The Turkish shows, yeah, YouTube that is non-Islam related. Yeah, there's so many things we could fast from. And subhanAllah, when you do, you find how much time you actually have in your life to do the things that you always say, oh, I wish I could do that, but I don't have the time for it, right? There's all these, how many of you have a stack of books in your room that you've ordered and bought, and you're like, I'm going to read that during the pandemic. But we haven't gotten very far, have we? But this is a good time to practice it. Again, these are days in which good deeds are counted more than any other days in the year. Some have just debated and talked about that. Well, what about Ramadan? Ramadan, it's the nights. In Dhul Hijjah, it's the days. So there are no days that are as rewarded as these days. And in Ramadan, there are no nights that are as rewarded as the nights of Ramadan. So the daytime is the special time right now. And there's one of the reasons some of the scholars have commented that there's more reward now too, is that in Ramadan, there's the special metaphysical blessings of the gates of paradise being open, the gates of hellfire being closed, the shayateen being locked up. Those metaphysical realities are not happening in these blessed and beautiful days. So you do actually will struggle with waswas of shaitan. You will struggle with different things. And because the struggle is greater, then the good deeds are also, it's harder to do. So because it's harder to do, there's also more reward in that way. Alhamdulillah, what was shared was that one of our students here, alhamdulillah, they deleted Instagram for a few months and they read 5 books. So inshallah, we all do something really great during these. Adil, I will have to I'll take a picture of the notes and I'll send it to one of the brothers to send to you, inshallah. But I can't go through the whole. It's really hard to repeat that briefly, inshallah. But I will get it to you, inshallah, tonight. Okay, we're gonna close. It is 9:30. Thank you guys for all of your input. May you guys have a really blessed. May we all have a really blessed, inshallah, 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. May they be very, very fruitful. May they truly be the best days of our year, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad, his noble family, companions, followers until the end of time. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us among your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us success to act upon what you taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, followers, and companions. Ameen. Jazakumullah khair, everyone. Thank you so much. Tomorrow is the first day. Tomorrow is the first day of Dhul Hijjah. inshallah. Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone.